Hello everyone! So it has been a hot minute since I last uploaded some Witcher related content to this channel. I think the last time I did anything Witcher was for WitcherCon, which was over this past summer. And we are getting very close to season 2 of The Witcher Netflix. So I wanted to start a brand new series on my channel called The Witcher Book Club. And the title sounds just as what it's going to be. I'm going to read through the Witcher saga, the main novels of the Witcher books, and just kind of do a deep dive, talk about things that I want to talk about in the books, talk about different themes, some of my favorite moments, some really key defining moments within the saga, and the things that I think really make the Witcher books so great. And talk about maybe some things that might relate to the actual Netflix show, which is coming out soon. So I very much am looking forward to actually rereading the Witcher books, because it's been a while since I last really read them, and I think now more than ever is the perfect time to dive into them again. And so I am going to just share my thoughts with you all on it. So without further ado, let's get into the Witcher Book Club. So let me talk a little bit about what I'm going to be doing for this video series. First of all, I'm not going to be going through the first 2 books of the Witcher book series. That means The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. I've talked a lot about The Last Wish more specifically on this channel already, because obviously The Last Wish and a little bit of Sword of Destiny very much relates to the first season of The Witcher Netflix. And so I actually had reread them like a year or so ago. So they're more fresh in my mind. So I kind of just didn't want to go back and reread them again. I really wanted to actually start on the actual Witcher saga, which starts with Blood of Elves. So if you are unfamiliar with how the Witcher books are structured, it's a little confusing, I won't lie. Andrzej Sapkowski basically, and this happens often with authors, so I wouldn't say that this is like uncommon that you might see happen. So Andrzej Sapkowski wrote his Witcher saga like as full novels, but there are 2 books that are kind of like prequels to the actual saga. They are The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, and they are basically a compilation of short stories related to Geralt and Ciri and Yennefer, and they're not written out in novel form, they're written out in short story form. They're very good, and if you haven't read them, I highly recommend reading those first before diving into Blood of Elves and all of the following books. But just for me personally, I'm more passionate and wanting to read through the saga, through the actual novels, and not so much the short stories right now. If you want to hear my takes on some of my favorite short stories and things like that, go check out some of my earlier videos where I kind of talk through a lot of them. I don't deep dive like I'm going to for this, but yeah, I've just kind of been there, and I read all of those already, so I want to go through Blood of Elves. Blood of Elves is probably my second favorite book in the whole Witcher saga. My first favorite is Baptism of Fire, and I think that is a personal fan favorite for many. But Blood of Elves actually has some really awesome things in the book itself. It's 7 chapters total, so I am going to cover not the entire book per video series, because I could probably talk about each chapter for like an hour long. So I'm gonna try to split these video series up and go through Blood of Elves by just a few chapters. And then we can, break it up in a video series so we don't have to digest the entire book in one sitting. I think after I go through talking about the chapters, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think might be in the Witcher Netflix Season 2 show, and some things that we already have confirmed that are probably going to be in the show, and just kind of my thoughts on that and what I'm hoping to see in the show itself, because at the time of recording this, it's not yet out. Chapter 1 of Blood of Elves opens with a prophecy from the seer Ithlinne. Verily I say unto you, the era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard, the time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt, Ted Dired, the time of end. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with the new sun. It will be reborn of the elder blood of Hen Kaer, of the seed that has been sown, a seed which will not sprout but will burst into flame. Es tuath esse, thus it shall be. Watch for the signs. What signs these shall be, I say unto you. First the earth will flow with the blood of Ensaid, the blood of elves. Oh, so this prophecy, the Ithlinne prophecy, it's a popular one. You know, if you watched season 1 of The Witcher Netflix, you may have heard Ciri say some very similar things when she was being attacked by those bandits or whatever. It was toward the end of the series, and she suddenly starts her entire demeanor changes and she starts spouting all of this prophecy. And that is something that Ciri does often. For first-time readers, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now. But as you read through Blood of Elves, I think it becomes a little bit more clear what this prophecy is all about, what it all means, and specifically how it relates to Ciri. So that's something that the book opens with, and it's something to ponder upon beginning Blood of Elves. So chapter 1 is a pretty good opening to the saga as a whole. It thrusts us in first to a nightmare that Ciri is having, and we will learn eventually that this is a recurring nightmare that Ciri has, and something that she often thinks about and dreams about is this rider. She talks about fear a lot. Ciri definitely has this fear in her own head of this rider, this dark rider, fear embodied in the figure of a black knight. And they describe the knight with like this helmet with birds of prey wings. And it's just a very dark nightmare for her. And she's woken up, and we find that she's with Geralt right now, traveling with him to Kaer Morhen. And I think it's a really interesting opening scene, and it opens with our two main characters, Geralt and Ciri. One thing I want to say about the Witcher books, and just the Witcher in general, is that I truly believe, and I'm sure many of you will agree with me, I truly believe that there are two main protagonists to the Witcher series. Obviously, Geralt is our main character, and we follow his journey through most of the books. But I would say Ciri is also the main character. I think that they're kind of co-protagonists. I wouldn't say that one is more than the other even. A lot because, again, their destinies are entwined, and this is something we learn more and more if you read the previous books and even watching the show and everything. If you've played the games, you know that Geralt and Ciri their fates are intertwined together in a way. And I guess Yennefer and Geralt also are in a different way. But so their stories are intertwined. Just always think about that a little bit more when you're reading through the books, that it's not all about Geralt, honestly. It's really all about Ciri, in my opinion. And she's a very significant character, and I love Ciri a lot. So I just wanted to share that really I think that they are the two main protagonists. So we get this little opening of Geralt and Ciri, but the bulk of this chapter isn't actually about them. The bulk of this chapter actually takes place in somewhere very different. Not in the trail to Kaer Morhen, but actually with our favorite bard, Dandelion, aka Jaskier. It's really hard for me going back and reading the books. I've been calling Dandelion Jaskier basically since the show came out. I feel like it now sits better with me than Dandelion does. so I am just used to calling him Jaskier now. So I may go back and forth on calling him Dandelion versus Jaskier. I think both names are fine. So it cuts to Dandelion, and if you see me looking down sometimes, by the way, I take a lot of notes, so I may just be referring to my notes. This is a book club after all, so tabs and notes are very important to make sure that I'm sharing what needs to be said. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm referring to my notes. So we open with Dandelion telling the tale of Geralt and Ciri at the basically it's at a giant ancient oak, and I may or may not pronounce this right, but Bloberis. I love this opening because, first of all, it's helping us as readers get a better idea of the world. Because for some, this may be their first time reading the Witcher saga, because again, this is technically like quote unquote the first book. So having this exposition opening where we learn a little bit more about the world that we're in, I think is very important for us to understand and get a little bit more context. But I love the opening of this place, and it's in this giant ancient oak protected by druids. And we get a little picture painted for us where we see that there are dwarves and there are elves and gnomes and humans all hanging out at this place. It's a very quote unquote tolerant place because unfortunately there is a lot of, there's a lot of racial tensions in the world of The Witcher due to a lot of deep-rooted issues between all of these different races. And normally you wouldn't see them all together and hanging out. Technically, they all are together listening to this story by Dandelion, but they're still separate. Like, the book describes the elves all sit together, the dwarves all sit together, so they're still kind of doing their own thing, but the only ones that aren't are the children, where you actually see all of the children playing together. So elf children and human children and dwarf children are all playing together, and I think just in general paints a really good picture of the world of The Witcher and what is going on in the world. And after Dandelion starts telling his story about Geralt and Ciri, apparently is a very moving story, and Yennefer is also included in this. We do meet some cool minor characters who aren't like the most important characters, but if you're a fan of the Witcher universe, it's cool to meet minor characters. Some of them like Sheldon Skaggs and Rayla of Lyria. If you play Gwent, you would notice that Rayla is actually a Gwent card and things like that. So is Sheldon Skaggs. This is where the exposition happens in the form of all of these different people sharing their political and just overall their hot takes on the world. We hear a little bit of opinion from everybody. They talk about things like why Nilfgaard is attacking everybody. Like, what's the deal with Nilfgaard? We're talking about Sintra and the fall of Sintra. People are talking about what their predictions are for what happened to Ciri, because the truth is, nobody really knows at this point what happened to Ciri. Some people think she died. I think the general consensus is that people think she died. People know that Calanthe is dead. And it seems to be common knowledge that Calanthe took her own life. Yeah, there's a lot of just general discussion of what the current state of the world is, and it helps us understand why, what's going on and what everybody's view is. But in a way, it's kind of like unreliable narrators, because these are just, a lot of them are common folk or just kind of people living in the world, and they are hearing things based on hearsay. Even what Dandelion is telling them in his story is considered hearsay in a way, so nobody really knows the story, but clearly things are getting around. The story of Geralt and the story of Ciri has gotten around at this point, and people know of them. They're kind of famous at this point. The druids even chime in and start talking about their own prophecies of why, Nilfgaard is attacking, and they think it's, because of us, and they have their own, like, kind of very extremist views on why Nilfgaard is beginning to attack and everything like that. So yeah, so we get a little bit of an opening exposition of all of these different people from different walks of life on the continent talking about the current state of the world. And it helps us as the reader get an idea of where we are in the story and what the heck is going on. But while they're all arguing, at that point, Dandelion, Jaskier, pieces out. He did his thing, he told the story, and he's not really here to listen to all of the post-commentary. So he pieces out and heads to his brothel or wherever he was, and he hangs out with some ladies. And this is where we get a visit from one of our key early villains of the Witcher saga, Rience. And I call him Rience. I think that there is a few different ways that you can pronounce his name. I think in Gwent they actually pronounce his name Rience. I'm not sure how they're going to pronounce his name in the show, but the audiobooks pronounce his name Rience, so I'm kind of used to calling him Rience. So forgive me if you pronounce it a different way. But Rience kind of makes his way in while Dandelion's hanging out with some ladies, and he, at first, you know, it seems a little sus that this guy's coming in and asking some questions, but he quickly gets very aggressive and wants to know more specifically about Ciri. He's like, this girl you described in the story, tell me more about her. And Dandelion's like, I'm not here to reveal like the actual true ending of my story because that would kill the whole point of the story. And so he doesn't, you know, tell Rience any information, and Rience quickly gets very aggressive. So Dandelion tries to make his way out and, you know, runs away. But inevitably gets captured by Rience. And Rience is really trying his best to pull information out of Dandelion. Dandelion does a pretty good job trying to keep it in, but I think he does give a little bit of information away to Rience, and it's unfortunate. I realize, like, Dandelion always gets himself captured, and he sometimes makes situations more difficult than they need to be, and he kind of does that in this sense too. He had to, you know, start blurting out all this stuff about Ciri, and he didn't know. I mean, technically he didn't know the consequences of this. He just thought it would be a good story, but he didn't realize that there are some people out there who are really looking for Ciri, specifically Nilfgaard. And so he sharing his little story definitely got him in some serious trouble. And as he's being questioned and interrogated, I think he kind of makes a little bit worse for himself because he's kind of helpless. Like, he's just a troubadour. He's just a bard. He doesn't really have any special skills or powers, and he needs somebody to save him. Usually it's Geralt. They're clearly separated at this point, but guess who comes to save him? Enter the next part of our story in this chapter, Yennefer! Yennefer comes in and saves Dandelion from Rience, and it's pretty awesome. I actually love this scene. She comes in, and I think it describes her as wearing men's clothing, so it's hard to make out who it is at first, and she beats the shit out of him, and she burns his face. So this is a very key point, because a lot of the art that you'll see of Rience, he has a bit of a burned and scarred face, and I believe it's from this moment when Yennefer uses her magic and burns his face. And so pretty awesome moment from Yennefer. You know, Dandelion is our damsel who needs saving, and Yennefer comes in and saves her, or saves him, saves her. So the two of them take some time to catch up and talk about things, and it seems that Dandelion doesn't know actually where Geralt is. They kind of catch up, and the two of them clearly haven't talked to Geralt in quite some time. And it's interesting, you know, they all used to hang out and see each other in different ways, and now they've kind of parted. And now, you know, neither of them have seen him in a while. And Yennefer talks a little bit with Jaskier, and she says to him, like, you were a good friend to Geralt. He kind of needed that. So At first, Yennefer and Jaskier definitely did not see eye to eye. They did not get along. They were pretty, they had a lot of remarks back and forth at each other. But at this point, Yennefer actually tells him, like, hey, you know, we didn't always see eye to eye, but you were a good friend to Geralt, and I think he really needed you. And it's really nice to hear that, because a lot of times I think that people can look at Jaskier, Dandelion, and see him just as like a useless kind of buffoon character. And in a lot of ways, yes, he is a buffoon. But he's not just like your comic relief. He definitely provides a lot of it. And he takes a little bit of the seriousness out of the dark world that they're in. But really, I do genuinely agree with Yennefer in that Jaskier is a friend that Geralt needed. He was alone and in his own thoughts and in his own head and going through a lot of shit. And he kind of just needed a friend. As much as the reluctance of Geralt probably was of having him around, I think he did, in essence, keep him around because he kind of needed that friend there at the time. So Yennefer acknowledges this, and I thought that was really nice. She also tells him to not talk about Ciri and her in the stories. She's like, please keep us out of the story. They bring up that clearly it's not a good idea to be talking about Ciri right now because there are some people after her, though Yennefer is not really sure who this guy Rience is that attacked Dandelion. The one interesting thing is that Dandelion picked up on something that Rience said that helped him understand that this guy was definitely from Nilfgaard, because he used the term massacre, or he used the term Battle of Cintra rather than the term Massacre of Cintra. And any person from the Northern Kingdoms will call it the Massacre of Cintra, because that's what it was. But anybody from the South, from Nilfgaard, will call it the Battle for Cintra. And since he said that, Dandelion picked up on that, and even Yennefer was like, oh, clever, very clever. But you know what? That's his skill set. And everybody has their own skill set. The next thing that Yennefer tells him to do is go to Redania to see Dijkstra. And she even says, like, Dijkstra sends his regards, which implies that there's something going on with Dandelion / Yennefer with Dijkstra from Redania, but it's not fully clear at this point in the book. So as an outside, a first-time reader, these names are just names, like who the heck is Dijkstra? Who's Philippa? They obviously become more important characters later on, but that kind of raises some new questions, I think, and adds a little bit more to the story and what the heck is going on. And finally, to end this chapter, after we get the opening scene between Dandelion and Yennefer, we close back again with our Witcher, Geralt, and Ciri. The two of them make it to Kaer Morhen, and we are first introduced to the other Witchers. We get to see that there are other Witchers at Kaer Morhen. We meet Eskel and we meet Vesemir, and we learn that Lambert and Cohen are also at Kaer Morhen. So Geralt reunites with his Witcher pals, and he arrives with a girl, and they are all like, what? Who is this girl? Geralt, who is she? It's interesting, the chapter ends, and Geralt brings Ciri up to meet the Witchers. And she's obviously very shy, and this is very awkward for her. I mean, she's like a 12-year-old girl who's like meeting all of these dudes for the first time. It's probably really awkward and just kind of scary for her. So she, talks a little bit about her internal monologue. We get a little bit of her fear. And Vesemir asks, who is this child, Wolf? Who is this girl? And Geralt answers and says, she's and he stammers for a bit, and you can tell he's like, it's hard for him to say these words, but then he finally ends and says, she's our destiny. So we're playing into the biggest theme of the entire Witcher series, which is destiny. And he doesn't just say she's my destiny, she says she's our destiny, which I think is a really important thing for him to bring up at this point. And I really, really love that final line of chapter 1. And it's a great opener for the story, and it brings us to learn what this is all going to be about and what this story is really about. So that's chapter 1 of Blood of Elves. A pretty solid opening, if you ask me. Okay, so there were a lot of things that I talked about in chapter 1, and I went a little bit longer than I thought I would, as you know what, I should have expected that I would ramble quite a bit in this series. So I want to now talk about what things from chapter 1 I think we might see in the actual Witcher Netflix series. I think it's hard to say what we're going to see. I think, number one, I do think that Ciri's dreams of the Black Rider are very important, and I hope that we see a little bit of that in the Netflix series. It may not be the thing that we open with. I think things are going to be switched around a little bit. We already know that we're going to get some short stories from Sword of Destiny in season 2. So that actually kind of backtracks from this book. The Novellen short story is going to be probably in the early episodes of season 2. Which technically isn't fully accurate with the book timeline, because that actually happens prior to Geralt being with Ciri. But I think maybe at some point early on we are going to get a nightmare sequence from Ciri where she does dream about this Black Rider. I think that part is very important, and I think that they should have that in the show. The opening, or Jaskier talking about Geralt and Ciri, I don't know if we're actually going to have that in this. So it looks like Jaskier is imprisoned in the most recent trailer that we got for season 2, which, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think at any point Jaskier gets imprisoned. So I think they might be changing that around a little bit. So we may not actually get this opening sequence of Jaskier telling his story and Rience capturing him. It actually might happen, because I do think Rience capturing Jaskier is important, and maybe that's how he gets imprisoned, but it looks like Geralt is getting Jaskier out of prison. So I don't know, it just seems like a weird timey-wimey thing that they're going to be doing now, where I don't know if Yennefer is going to be the one to save Jaskier here. I kind of hope she does, but I don't know. My thought is Yen might be off with Istredd at some point in the early series, and I think we might get some elements from A Shard of Ice within the early season 2, but I don't know. But I think definitely the nightmare, and I think obviously Geralt getting to Kaer Morhen with Ciri is obviously going to happen. And I would love for that line to actually come out, because there have been moments where the show has taken lines directly from the book. So I would love it if maybe an episode ended just like this, where Geralt gets to Vesemir and Eskel, and they ask, "Who's this girl?" And Geralt says, "She's our destiny." I think that would be a really good ending to one of the episodes, so we'll see if they actually include it. So that concludes everything from me for chapter 1 of Blood of Elves. Stay tuned for the next one. We're going to talk about chapter 2, which gets into some very spicy topics regarding Triss Merigold. So make sure you tune in for chapter 2. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me for my first episode ever of Witcher Book Club. I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.